We're going to continue to dive a little bit deeper now in this format. One of the nice things about this conference is that there's kind of a mix of formats that are available, and that is designed to promote conversations that sometimes start with the thought-provoking presentations, move into some discussion-oriented panels such as this one, and then continue in the hallway conversations and the receptions and over meals, etc. So hopefully you'll find that the format for the overall conference is facilitating the kind of conversations we need to address the issues and challenges that will allow us to ultimately succeed in using mobile devices in education. So this particular session, as you can see up here, is titled Mobile Infrastructure State-of-the-Art Strategies, and we have a great panel here with us today. We have with us Steve Clemens, who is the Chief Technology Officer at San Diego County's Office of Education, and he will talk about some of their experience and some of the criteria and guidelines that they look at and use when they take on new mobile projects. We have Janet Davis, who is the Associate Director for Wireless Education Strategy and Sales Support at Verizon Wireless. And you heard from Janet once already today, but we will hear some more interesting things from her about specific projects during this session. And then we have Renee Seals, who is the Director of Technology for Piedmont City School District. And we'll hear some more on-the-ground, feet-on-the-street stories as well from Piedmont. My name is Michael Flood. I run education and the work that we do in education at Khajiit. We are a wireless carrier, but we're focused on just kids in education. Those are our markets. And so on the kids side, it's a consumer market where the focus is on the devices and the technology and the connectivity that families buy for kids, and doing that with the right kind of parental controls, et cetera, that families are looking for when they're, as you heard in the presentation earlier today, increasingly buying these devices and connectivity for younger and younger and younger kids, right? So we see huge growth in those markets. And then we also work directly with educational institutions, and those are K through 12 schools, districts, higher education institutions, nonprofits, research organizations, grant-funded projects, all sorts of different implementations where they want to use wireless devices and services as a component of how they're accomplishing educational delivery and outcomes. And they want to do that in a way that works very well with educational budgets. And there have been a lot of challenges in working within the structure of an educational budget and the typical business model of the wireless industry. And so we've really attempted to address a lot of those issues in the way that we work. So those are the main areas in which we operate. I want to let each one of the panel members have some time to talk on their own about their individual expertise. And then at the end of the session, we will also open it up for questions. So I'm going to go through each of the panel members, and then we will, from there, move forward. First, I want to talk a little bit about some of the projects we've done at Khajiit. One of the nice things we have about being a small company in this space is that we're able to kind of go out and branch into different areas of the problem set. So while the core of what we do is working with schools on enabling mobile learning with the devices in the hands of students, we're actually also looking at a lot of the peripheral problems and challenges that remain to the adoption of mobile learning across the whole industry. And we've been very fortunate to work on some interesting projects. So I want to spend some time talking about some of those projects and not so much about what we do. So one of those that's very interesting, we work with the National Center for Teaching in America's Future. They are focused on teacher preparation and skills development for pre-service teachers. So they partner with colleges of education across the country, and they work with them to develop communities of practice where those teachers can now be very engaged with their peers and with their professors, with the colleges themselves, and not just when they're there on campus, but when they go out into their pre-service teaching experience, when they're doing that work. What we've done with NCTAF in their project called T-Link, Teaching and Learning in Networked Communities, is we have actually equipped these pre-service teachers with tablets, smartphones, modem devices to connect maybe devices they've brought on their own, to equip them with this connectivity so that they can use mobile technology during this critical time of development as a new teacher. This, I think, is really pivotal work. And the reason that I was really excited about getting involved in this project is because as I've gone around talking to school districts around the country, a lot of what I hear in feedback from CIOs, from superintendents, is they say, you know, the teachers that are the best at showing success in adopting mobile technology have already been teaching for 4 or 5 years. Our new teachers, that doesn't work. And our old teachers who are really close to retirement, who just want to finish and, you know, get out before change hits, sometimes it doesn't work there either. The best ones seem to be right in the middle, and it's a big middle, right? You know, they've been teaching 4 or 5 years, but not quite yet 30, you know, so it's a big group in the middle. But, you know, it made me ask, well, why is it that these new young teachers coming out of college aren't really great at using mobile technology in the classroom? And they say, well, the reason is because they just finished learning how to do it the old way. They just got through this whole 4-year program where they were taught how to teach under the industrial model. And they're still trying to figure out how to do that. And for them to show up and immediately be told that everything you just learned is not how we do it here really causes a lot of confusion. And on top of that, they're also still trying to learn things like classroom discipline, right? Which is a big challenge that's hard to teach during pre-service teaching, right? But they've got to learn how to handle a classroom before they can necessarily think about critically changing the way that they've been taught to teach. So I actually did some guest lecturing in teacher preparation programs as well at a college in the metro Atlanta area. And I found, you know, this was in practice in that experience absolutely true. I came in just to do some guest lecturing on mobile technology and education and what's happening. And after we talked about some of these real-world examples, the professor kind of pulled me aside and said, thank you so much for coming. Before you came, the most recent case studies we were working with about technology and education were from 1999. And I was like, wow, you know, this was really, really shocking. So I'm really happy about the work that NICTAF is doing. And we're furthering that work in the future as we're partnering with some new organizations in 2013 to actually work on professional development, creating courses that can be delivered to teachers and to districts and actually delivered in a way that builds capacity for those courses to then be delivered within the educational community itself so that we don't have to stay involved through that whole process around how to use mobile technology. And I think that's going to be very critical as well. We're also working with Harvard's EcoMobile project, so you may have already seen some things about that project here. But the augmented reality examples you saw around pond ecosystems and stream ecosystems earlier, we're providing the technology and the connectivity for that project as well. So that's been very helpful in terms of seeing a real-world example of the mobile technology impacting student learning in science. We're also partnered with the American Association for the Advancement of Science in their Active Explorer project. The reason that one was very interesting for us to be involved in is because a lot of these research and grant-oriented projects, they have a specific purpose and they also have a specific timeline. And the traditional kind of business model in the wireless industry has, you know, usually you buy a device with a rate plan on an annual contract, et cetera. And that doesn't always work really well with grant-funded pilots, projects, et cetera. And so in the case of this project with Active Explorer, the actual field implementation of that work, much like EcoMobile with Harvard, they may actually only be interacting and using the devices for a specific amount of time. In EcoMobile, it's, you know, a day out in the field here, there, et cetera. In the Active Explorer project, it may be a month or 2 months that they're actually showing this implementation to see how it works. So, you know, annual, you know, data plans and contracts that are designed around full-time use just don't make sense. So we're able to very cost-effectively address that. At the same time, working with an organization that specializes in science education and in really the scientific community at large to go out and show how teachers can use this platform to create their own explorations, which is really neat about the Active Explorer project. We've also been working with some one-to-one projects. So we have a one-to-one Android tablet project that's been going on in Oregon, which has been very interesting, working with Emergence. We have Marie Billarda here in the room with Emergence, who has been leading that project. And we've learned some interesting things there. And we also have Android one-to-one projects going on in Chicago Public Schools and Fairfax County Public Schools this year in 6th and 8th grades, where they're also now taking a new approach to every student having a device, a tablet with anytime, anywhere connectivity, so they use it inside and outside the classroom. And we're already seeing some of the transformations that are coming out of that. So all of these projects, you know, we find address different pieces of the problem. We don't believe that there is a single solution, as was kind of alluded to in this morning's session, of put the device there and magic happens, right? There's a lot of pieces that have to happen, and we're very interested in finding each one of those pieces and figuring out how can we help make sure that part of the puzzle gets solved. So that's a little bit about who we are and what we're interested in. I'm going to stop there and move on, and I'd like to introduce Steve Clemens, and Steve can tell us a little bit more about San Diego's perspectives.
Great, good morning. A little bit about San Diego and California in general. Education in California has 3 tiers of educational departments. There's districts, there's intermediate agencies, and then there's the California Department of Education. I work at an intermediate agency. We support 42 school districts and approximately 400,000 students. So it's a very diverse area in San Diego, very rural, very urban. Most people think of the city of San Diego when they think of San Diego, but I support the whole county, and I find myself driving all over from the desert all the way to Orange County, the north part of the county, all the way to the Mexican border to support our students. So it's a very interesting job. We run a 24/7 data center. We do all the payroll for the teachers. We do about 55,000 checks a month, which is a huge undertaking, which, putting that in perspective, the number of checks we cut for teachers is larger than Chicago public schools. So in terms of our scope and scale, it's quite large, and I'm right in the midst of doing an HR payroll finance system, which is kind of wild. But in terms of mobile learning and student learning, there's a number of things that are happening in California that are somewhat progressive, moving us forward. First thing I want to mention is our districts are moving very fast in terms of mobile devices. We are in the process of rolling out over 40,000 iPads. I mean, that's huge across many different students in many different districts. We have iPod touches. We have a whole gamut of devices out there. A number of districts are doing bring your own device concepts, trying to move into that so they can save a little money and still get into the mobile devices. The hardest part for us is really trying to manage that and manage it from the perspective of really working with the districts, not to go out just to buy a device, but to think of their overall architecture. So part of the role that the County Office of Education plays is consulting, going out and working with them on their infrastructure. Do you have enough bandwidth coming to the school? Do you have enough wireless infrastructure? Are your teachers trained? So there's a number of things that we're doing in all those different areas to support the districts in order to get them ahead, so when the students actually turn on their devices, they have something there for them. So a couple things I want to mention. We just passed an assembly bill in California that allows for synchronous online learning. California, in a lot of ways, is a bit behind. Everything is seat time based for attendance and for ADA, for revenue. We're trying to change that. Our original bill that San Diego had drafted, and we got a legislator to push it through the assembly, got watered down and became just a synchronous online learning bill, which was very disappointed. We wanted synchronous and asynchronous. But it provides us an opportunity to have students at home, or if they're on vacation or something, actually take a course and get attendance. So we're really trying to shape that. It goes into effect in 2014, but in San Diego we're looking for a waiver to start it now so we can do a pilot within the county. The state superintendent did what's called an EdTech task force, where he's recommending mobile devices for all students in California. And part of his goal is to get that funded. It's very, very ambitious, but I think the goal is a good one, to really move into the mobile environment. You have to dream big, so the state superintendent is doing that. Of course, keep in mind again all those implications of wireless infrastructure, broadband at home, all of those things that we're trying to put together in that architecture and working with our friends at Verizon and other providers to really try and bring that broadband piece at home. And many of you may have heard of Connect to Compete, which is a low-cost, wired, cable-provided internet access. We're doing the pilot in San Diego right now and rolling that out to about 150 schools with our partner Cox. And that's really starting to take off, which is exciting to see that. We've also done a number of partnerships for wireless and broadband access for students at home, working with One Economy Corporation. One of the things that we did is we put in a wireless infrastructure for a 1,000-unit low-income housing development right on the Mexican border. Very exciting. The families there, very low income, had no internet access, and we're so excited to get that. We also provided them very, very low-cost devices, and then worked with the schools and the teachers to let them know that all these students would have access so that they could prepare for it. Another thing that we've been doing is we developed a private cloud infrastructure. At the County Office of Education, I have this huge data center. I mean, it truly is. I've got a mainframe, I've got all my servers and everything, and I thought, what an opportunity to provide a private cloud infrastructure to host educational applications for our students. One of the things that's happening in California, which is happening in many of your schools as well, is financial problems. So as the schools are cutting their tech staff and their tech environments, kind of counterproductive to where they want to go in terms of education and mobile devices, they have kind of competing goals at the moment. So I've been able to take some of that infrastructure from the districts. I actually run almost wholesale the whole infrastructure for 12 districts at my site. And then I have staff that go out to the districts and provide classroom support. So the district has no tech support on their budget. They run everything through mine, and they've been able to save significant dollars. One school district is 200 students. They were able to save $40,000 in the first year. Now, $40,000 doesn't sound much, but to a 200-student district, that's a lot. I mean, that's really a beginning teacher's salary. So that's been exciting. We've also developed a professional development environment. We're calling it the Leading Edge Certification. It's an 8-week course for teachers on how to teach in an online and blended environment. And Leading Edge Certification is something that's happening throughout California, but San Diego's taken a real lead on it. The demand is amazing. I mean, the teachers who want to sign up for this course are, there's a waiting list at the moment. We're in our 8th cohort of teachers at the moment. And they do everything through a learning management system, one face-to-face class, and then everything else is online. So they get to utilize the tools of blogging and communicating with each other. It's a really great opportunity for them to learn to be a student and then know what their students are going to be learning within their online classes. Another thing that's kind of innovative as well that we're doing is turning that leading edge certification into a master's program. So we're creating more online courses and working with San Diego State University to give master's degree credit for the credit that they earn in these classes. So it's incentive for those teachers to get their master's degree, get more income because they go up on the salary schedule through this ability to take these classes. Some of the courses are like digital literacy, media and the Common Core, teaching in an online environment. So it's very well-rounded, and with our partnership at the university, it's very exciting and very innovative. With that, I don't want to take everybody's time, so we could move on to the next one.
Sure. So our next speaker, thank you, Steve, is Janet. Janet from Verizon. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, guys. Great to hear everything that's happening at Kajit as well as at San Diego. I actually look at things from a nationwide perspective, and that's part of my job is to look at what we're doing nationwide, which is very interesting considering the fact that not one state is the same, nor is any school district the same. So interesting to sit in my position and say, how do we better support what's going on in education when there's really no standards by which everybody is deploying mobile learning or even how they're defining mobile learning. And so part of what we're doing at Verizon is really looking at what do we need to do to better support what's going on in the industry. And we've been very successful with a lot of one-to-one learning opportunities we've had down in San Diego, all throughout the country. And one of the things that's really come through is there's going to be different models that are out there. And that's okay. Every school district is going to do something a little bit different. And what we need to be able to do is understand and listen to what you want to do and help you through that process. But I'm going to, and part of that is looking at the different components. You talked about a learning management system. A learning management system is one of the key components. But don't get that confused with classroom management, which don't, and then what are you going to do with your content? A lot of the times we talk about the infrastructure piece of it, we talk about the device, we talk about the connectivity, whether that's Wi-Fi, 3G, 4G, but we forget to talk about what actually is going to be done with that device, and there isn't magic when it happens with that device, when it's given to the teachers. The teachers have to have training, which I'm glad to hear you talk about the professional development, because we truly believe that's a key component. Kids are learning, and they can actually help teachers along the path, but the teachers have to have a comfort level with that device and whatever infrastructure you put around that. So as we're looking at this, we're looking at it holistically, everything from the LMS, how you do content content filtering to meet your SEPA requirements, so that you have the security built in, the device management, which is equally important, especially as you're starting to roll out thousands of devices. You want to be able to know what you have hitting your network and where you can control that. In addition to the fact we want to understand the cloud piece of it, because there's the public cloud, there's the private cloud. Where are you going to start to store all this information? How are you going to store all this information? And then when you look at the content piece of it and the professional development, there's also other apps that come into play. Will you need an email platform so the students can actually email the teachers and be able to email their information back up maybe to the LMS system, depending on how that LMS system is set up? These are the things you talked about, the periphery. Those are all the periphery things. It's great to talk about the device. It's great to talk about the connectivity. But the reality is, it's when you bring everything together that you really start to look at a holistic solution and integrating that device into the 8 to 3 day, and then understanding how that student's going to use it outside of the classroom. And that's really whether you're talking about a flipped classroom, whether you're talking about a blended classroom. Those things all have to be discussed. And a lot of people are very excited about what's going on with mobile learning. But don't sell yourself short. Take the time to bring all the people together, the curriculum department, the instructional technologists, the IT department, the CFO, the superintendents, the principals. If you have key teachers that are out there, bring them to the table. Do your due diligence, do your planning. It was said this morning, nobody wants to have our kids be guinea pigs. We don't. However, we do want you to move ahead and bring mobile learning to the environment. Plan for it. Planning, probably in what I've seen at the school districts I've gone out to, is usually 6 to 9 to 12 months of planning so that you have all that infrastructure in place. Use your friends at the county superintendent's or at the BOSI's office. Utilize your vendors, because a lot of us have the experience and we're able to see what's going on nationwide. You may think that your account manager only has access to what he's seeing in his territory. The reality is they don't. We host nationwide calls, so our sales force are hearing about what's going on from a nationwide perspective. We're doing case studies. We're helping them to educate them so they can better service you. And that's truly, I'll end with one of our stories. We have a school district, and the woman who I talked to at the school district, a very humble individual, took it upon herself based on a master's course she was taking, and the professor challenged her to actually deploy, to become a mobile learner in her world. And so she took it upon herself to look at what was going on around her high school. And she deployed with a senior class of 400 students tablets. Now, she didn't just deploy them. She actually looked at what they were doing, and these kids were sitting around on their BlackBerries, on their iPhones. They were typing their papers as they were sitting in class, and then emailing it to themselves to be able to print it. This is what's going on. This is our world of our children. So she looked at this and said, you know what? I need to be able to provide 21st century skills to these seniors who are leaving our environment. It was an urban environment, so they deployed it with 3G, I'll be honest with you. We're moving to 4G on that. But we were able to deploy it with the Galaxy Tab. She was able to put an LMS system on the device. We were able to do a private network back to their content filtering so that we were protected in terms of SEPA. They were able to use Google Docs to be able to do an email system and have the applications out there. She was able to go out, look at what they had for curriculum for the senior class, uploaded all of the classes into the LMS system, except for the English book because it was so old that she actually had to go to the teacher, say, are these the books you're actually having the kids read? She said yes. She went out and found them, was able to make PDFs of them or be able to find them free on the internet, uploaded those, and spent 2 hours with each of those teachers, not giving them advice about what the device was like, but helping them understand the LMS system and how the children were going to be using that. They actually used that all last year and graduated their first class using the Galaxy Tab, and this year they've extended it to the junior class. That's exciting to see, and I know a lot of us want to think about doing it with the younger kids. I challenge you, as I close this out, think about doing it with the children who are ready to go into the 21st century workforce. We as a company, I can tell you, if you come in to work for us, we're not going to ask you if you need a spreadsheet class, a PowerPoint class, a Word class, or an Outlook class. We're going to expect you to know how to do that. And by giving it to those seniors, she has now prepared 400 kids who are now entering college and the workforce better prepared than they were the year before. So thank you.
Thank you, Janet. So very good story there at the end in terms of real-world experience. And for more specifically real-world experience,
yes,
we want to bring it over to Renee from Piedmont. So Renee, can you share some stories with us?
We'll try our best. We're completely on the opposite end of the scale than my colleague Steve. While he has a whole staff, I am the staff. And we serve about 1,100 students. And I'll just give you a little history about Piedmont City Schools and where we began in our one-to-one journey. We began with a pilot in our high school of 30 MacBooks in the school year 2009-2010. And just wondered, what's going to be the demand there? Is this really going to take off? And we had pieced together a basic wireless infrastructure there to support 30 MacBooks. The demand for that cart of MacBooks was so phenomenal that mid-year our superintendent decided that we were going to go ahead and increase that to 120 MacBooks in 4 carts. Wow, that was great. But that began to show us the possibilities of what the students would be able to achieve. So I clearly identify with your story about the lady that saw what was going on. And it's amazing to see students just take their schoolwork and have a whole different approach to it and do it on the fly. It really is. So we pondered that. We were lucky enough to win a grant, an Enhancing Education Through Technology grant in 2009. And that focused on bringing professional development and 21st century tools to our high school teachers. And we took a group of 9 teachers and administrators to Mooresville, North Carolina to see what they were doing in the spring of 2010. And we came back, and the high school teacher that was probably least likely to adopt said, if you'll just get this technology in our hands, we can do some amazing things. So, sat down with the superintendent and the planning committee, and that was where we began a transformational process. We began to look at our initiative less about just the technology and how we're going to transform our entire community. And how are we going to leverage technology to make that happen? The best thing our superintendent has ever done was to pull us out of silos and form a planning team. Now, I would love to tell you that it took us 3 years to decide what we were going to do, but it didn't. In May, we decided that we were going to go ahead with our one-to-one project, and we were going to focus on our high school, grades 9 through 12, about 350 students. As Mr. Aiken approached our teachers and asked, who would be interested in attending a summer institute in Mooresville, North Carolina, the week before school starts, the whole high school staff, almost the whole high school staff wanted to go. And that sparked him even further. So he took it down to the middle school and said, do you think you might? Most of the middle school said, if we had the technology, sure we'd go. Took it a little bit lower and said, do you really think maybe 4th through 5th grade would go? 80% of that staff. So the week before we start school, we take this group of people to Mooresville, North Carolina, and they're blown away by what they see. We had already planned now this initiative to serve 350 kids. We get back from Mooresville and we just take off with this vision of transforming our community. We, instead of deploying 350 MacBooks, we went to 850 MacBooks, a learning management system, and a complete overhaul of a wireless infrastructure in 6 weeks with a technology staff of 1. So I say that not to bring applause to me, but to tell you there is no point in waiting a long time. You know, Dr. Dede gave us a great analogy a little while earlier about old wine in new bottles. And it struck me that we really need to be thinking about a different analogy. And that would be new wine in old wineskins. What happens whenever you put new wine in old wineskins? A new way of doing things in old structures. That wineskin it's no longer elastic. It can't give. You've got a whole process taking place in that old wineskin. Students learning in new ways. And as that fermentation process takes place, it grows. And then it breaks the wineskin, and both the wine and the wineskin are no good. Rather, let's put new wine into new wineskins, new ways of doing things into new structures, and let's watch that whole process grow. And you're going to see what emerges as a great tasting wine and a wineskin that is still intact and can be used for other purposes other than for fermenting wine. Our students are capable of so much more than we give them credit for. They have so much innovation and creativity in them that we're missing whenever we try to teach them in old structures. The thing that we're lacking in Piedmont, Alabama is high-speed internet bandwidth. Without that, mobile learning is not going to continue. We were fortunate enough in November of 2010, just a couple of short months after we did our rollout, the FCC announced a program called EDU 2011, and that's how I became acquainted with Steve. And it was later dubbed Learning on the Go. Our approach to that pilot was not only a mobile device with mobile internet access built in, but because our community, our student population is over 65% free and reduced lunch, we need a method of leveling the playing field. So our approach to that grant was to create a citywide mesh and then complement it through our partners with Verizon with MiFi devices. And that has been a great adventure. The sad part is that grant only lasts for a year. Now, what are we going to do? Are we going to go back and tell our kids, now you've got to take all this new creativity and innovation that you've learned is built into you and put them back in an old structure? What's going to happen? The structure will break. The wine and the structure will be of no value. I think it's very critical as you look ahead. We have developed the partnership mentality that we seek out service providers that can come alongside us and provide services and or products that can help us not only innovate our process, but sustain our process. One of our great partners, of course, is Verizon, but our College of Education, our Jacksonville State University is only 12 miles down the road. We have partnered with their College of Education. We bring their pre-service teachers into our school district for an entire year. The college outfits them with their own MacBook Air. Then they're quickly immersed in a 21st century innovative classroom. And yes, what we found is some of our best 21st century teachers are our veteran teachers who are just a little bit afraid of the technology. So you have the great background of classroom management You have the energy and the innovativeness and the creativity of a pre-service teacher married together for an entire year. Now that's transformational for our school. That's transformational for our students. It supports the teachers in that they work together as a team. Students get the benefit of learning what kids are seeing in college. They also get introduced to the possibility, oh, there is a college 12 miles down the road. For so many of our students in Piedmont, rarely make that journey. So now we've opened a door of opportunity. As we approached our one-to-one initiative, and especially with learning on the go, what we hoped would come out of it is that parents and grandparents who are raising students would seek ways to use the technology when their students are not. What we've seen is many parents and grandparents use the technology to apply for jobs, to seek job opportunities, to further their education. Many of our parents have only, maybe not even a high school diploma. Many have gone back and received their GED. Many more have gone on and pursued college. As we delivered our MiFi devices, we conducted just some informal interviews. And one of the parents said, "This is the best thing you have ever done for my child, because without this, he would not have the opportunities that he needs to excel in a global world." Mr. Ake and I are very blessed to be able to serve our state on the Alabama Head Committee. Our state is looking at putting a mobile device in every student's hand very quickly. I think that our time frame is the first round by 2013, 2014, and that will be a small pilot to see how that goes. Alabama is typically looked at as being one of the states that's most far behind. If they say that, some even say that if it were not for Mississippi, Alabama would be the last. But we're trying to take Alabama ahead, and we believe that it's through the partnerships with Verizon, with the College of Education, with others of our service providers that are going to be able to take those pilot projects, find the best of the best professional practices, and move us forward. I think that's it.
Thank you, Renee.
Awesome.
So I'm actually going to stand up, not just because I want to be the spotlight, but because half the room can't see me when I'm sitting behind this podium. So I wanted to bring back across all the speakers, there were actually a number of things, as we talked before the session and you heard during the session, that make up the infrastructure, right? And so some of us, when we think about infrastructure, especially for people like me who are very technology-oriented, we think about the technology, right? But there's really so many components that make a mobile learning program successful that you have to think about. And I just wanted to read back some of these that we've talked about here. So obviously we've got network, and we've got network both on and off campus. We've got the learning management system and the student information system, and how those maybe need to be adjusted from what you've been using in a traditional environment to actually working well with students who are learning in a variety of contexts, a variety of places and times, et cetera. The content and the apps that are being delivered, the professional development that's associated with helping teachers adjust to delivering education in a different way and the pedagogy methods that go along with that. We heard mention about cloud-based storage, so all of the other network components that are in the central infrastructure that may host applications and user content and profiles and information about the students as we move forward. The physical devices that the students are using, and there may be a variety of those depending on whether it's a BYOD program or a centrally managed kind of standardized technology. And then community engagement. And community engagement, it involves reaching out and communicating with the parents, understanding what their buy-in is here, and helping them understand what you're planning to do. But it's also about the culture around one of these initiatives. And I have seen a variety of initiatives implemented around the country where those cultures can vary dramatically, where an initiative may actually come from a top-down approach and you don't have the grassroots level buy-in. And it's based on a pilot that was very successful where that grassroots buy-in existed. And now you try and say, well, this worked, let's just replicate it everywhere. But you forget to create the same grassroots first before you do it. And that can certainly impact the success of a wider scale implementation. And so we had a good conversation earlier today about scaling, and that's an important component. So culture is very component. So what we want to do with the balance of the time here is really open it up for questions. from anybody in the audience about any of these topics for any of the speakers. So please feel free to stand up and address a question. Yes, Dr. Soloway.
Hi, I'm interested in the software issue. I understand the LMS, but you're from San Diego. You've got all these machines. How do you handle the software? Because they're going to be at grade levels. How do you deal with software?
Okay, I'm just going to briefly repeat the question so it's captured on the recordings here. So the question we had from Dr. Soloway was about the software. How are you managing software, especially on such a large number of machines?
Well, you know, that is a huge challenge, and it's not just the software of the curriculum, it's the software of the browsers and versions. We're in kind of an interesting environment when you just think about browsers now, because there's Safari and Chrome and Firefox and IE, and is it version 7 IE or version 9 Chrome or whatever it may be. And it's becoming a huge challenge for us that we really in some ways didn't have before. You know, I remember the holy wars of is it a Mac or a PC? You know, I'd rather have that holy war today than, you know, which browser are you using? So it is a huge challenge, and what I'm trying to do more than anything is to standardize. And I know in education that's very difficult, but at least to get to the latest versions of certain software, operating systems, huge issue. There's still Windows 98 machines out there. When I see Windows 98 machines in my districts, a lot of times they're limping them along and spending money in order to keep them going. I encourage them to replace it and to refresh it. And we are able to find monies to do that. Sometimes a teacher will just keep something in the back of the room and use it and put a kid on it, and that's not really fair because it's not working right, or it's Windows 98 or something like that. So encourage getting the latest versions of software, the latest versions of the browsers, keeping them up to date. And I do have a staff of 80 people, I'm sorry to tell you, that I can send out and make sure that everything is operating correctly on these computers in the labs, in the classroom. And from a curriculum perspective, really working with the software vendors to say it must work on an iPad. Don't do it in Flash if you're going to do something. I was working with Pearson, and hopefully there's no Pearson people out here. But I encourage their engineers, please don't do your Success Maker in Flash. You know, your logon is in Flash. You know, a variety of things are in Flash. It won't work on these 40,000 iPads that we're rolling out. So they need to evolve as well, which really necessitates an organization and school to understand architecture as it comes to software. And my background isn't education. My background is enterprise architecture, architecture of IT systems. I worked at the state of California with all of our departments trying to standardize software to make sure everything would work together, and standardize data, you know, data quality, data sources, so we can share data across systems. It's so important to, you know, from a data perspective, an infrastructure perspective, a software perspective, to have an architecture that really lays out things that will work together. Because I like to have the philosophy or a principle of any device, any time, and that's critical, anywhere. So those principles necessitate that things interoperate, and it really means working with our vendors, keeping things up to date, working with the schools, doing a refresh plan for our hardware and software.
Thank you, Steve. Yes?
I have a question on infrastructure. The 3G, 4G versus wireless, as far as the 1.1 implementation, the BYOD implementation, and the content filtering concern. Maybe Ms. Davis could address that.
Well, I think there's two different models out there just talking about, when people talk about wireless, I think people get confused. There is Wi-Fi, and there's what the cellular providers carry, which is either 3G or 4G. There's two different models when you look at that. We can be a replacement for a Wi-Fi system, or we can be a complement, and we were talking about that up here beforehand. If you are choosing for us to be, or any carrier to be, a replacement, which is an option, we have to make sure our network can handle it as well. So work with your local team to bring in our network team. So, because here's the deal. This is different than if we're deploying an enterprise, because with an enterprise, if you do a sales force of 1,000 laptops or 1,000, iPads, they're going to be dispersed. When you're looking at a 3G or 4G deployment within a school, especially where we're the replacement, you're a concentrated effort. And we've got to understand what is going on with that cell tower during that time frame that you're going to be using that. So it's an option. It's just something we have to make sure we have the capacity with that cell tower that's hitting that, so we don't cause anything to go down anywhere. And that's happened. You can Google it. There's stories out there, unfortunately, where cell towers have been taken down because of what's going on at a local school. Because we weren't prepared. Was not us, thank you. But it wasn't, the carrier wasn't prepared for what was going to happen. In terms of the content filtering, there's a couple of different options out there. We can do a private network, which is probably the best because we can actually hook into your system, take it back to our switch with static IPs, and those devices only can go back through your network and your browser. So that's an option out there. There's also other content filtering out there, like Lightspeed has options. We're looking at all those different options to make sure we understand if you're choosing one of those, how we work with that when we're looking at a total solution and infrastructure with you.
So there's a partial, if you're not the total solution, if our wireless is still fine for most of our day-to-day
Right.
operations, we're implementing a rollout, say 100 iPads in
Right.
school, and maybe taking that to the 3G, 4G rather than, so that my concern primarily was the content.
Right. And
So you're saying that you can use our content filter. Oh, excuse me.
Yes.
We can use you can use our content filter. You can push everything back through our content
Correct.
filter.
We put in a direct connection. Think of it that way, between our switch and you. And then everything through a static IP is routed back through you.
Okay.
We've done private networks for years with public safety because they don't want to be able to put the information they're sending, like to their police cruisers, over the open internet. It's a closed internet for you.
And that would,
I was just going to add to that. I mean, not to be an advertisement for Verizon, but they've got some great network architecture plans for, for the internet filtering and for routing things and for really hybrid networks. It really is very sophisticated, and I encourage districts really to work, with your vendors to come up with those needs and options.
Yeah, and I just want to add one quick thing to that. On the Wi-Fi versus 3G, 4G question, this is really, in my opinion, something that does come back not just to technology in terms of bandwidth and speed and things like that, but it comes back to cost. And so this is a question of least cost routing. And with a very high density of users, if you have a sufficient backhaul connection available at that site, Wi-Fi will usually be the least cost route versus trying to put every user on a mobile broadband connection simultaneously, because even the investment that a carrier has to make in upgrading the network will end up, and that cost will come back eventually to you in the service. So usually Wi-Fi is the least cost route. Now that may change in the future as we move further with 4G, 5G, et cetera. On the filtering piece, there are two major pieces about filtering. One of them is the content filtering of your own provided devices and connectivity, and then the other one is, especially in BYOD, how do you manage the content access of students who are bringing in their own device, maybe with their own 3G, 4G connection. And there are ways to do that, that you can do software-based or network-based. So in our case, we've done that in a network-based method, where if they're coming in, we take the school's policy, put it in the network itself, and then when the student comes in during the school hours, their parent has opted their device in to say, during school hours, let the school's policy manage my kid's 3G connection. And that way they have a consistent experience for what they're allowed to do on the network, whether they're using the school's network or not. We even have one district that prohibits using your own network, when you're at school. So the actual policy that school district has implemented with us that the parent opts into is no matter what the kid tries to do on their mobile device on their 3G network, they get a deny page that says, get back on the school network. But that's customizing the solution to your policy. And again, working with your service provider is exactly the right message.
So this is a great panel because there's a carrier and kind of a large staff district and a district with less staff. So when you're making infrastructure technology decisions, thinking about kind of internet access, but also wireless infrastructure, but also cloud infrastructure, do you guys have any insight into which things should go into the I'm going to build it list and which things go into the I'm going to buy it wholesale from a vendor. And with services for wireless infrastructure, I mean, you guys not only build and deploy, but in many ways operate wireless networks. And so, you know, in North Carolina, there's a nonprofit that operates kind of a statewide fiber optic network, and the General Assembly decided to fund that to yank fiber to literally every single school, all K-12 schools in North Carolina. That worked great for North Carolina because we got to build out from a large fiber optic infrastructure that was already in place with the universities. Other states operate theirs wildly differently, and the same is true on the cloud and wireless side. So how do you know when to build it? How do you know when to buy it?
Let's have the districts, I think, answer that first.
Well, in Alabama, we have a similar situation in North Carolina. We have the Alabama Supercomputer Authority that connects all of our universities, and just about 6 or 7 years ago, they provided a fiber link to every high school in Alabama for access distance learning. And that's great because that gives us the backbone that we need. And as we rolled out our first MacBooks in 2010, the 850, we really did not know what our bandwidth needs were going to be. So it was critical to work with that service provider, the Supercomputer Authority, and they were great to say, hey, look, let's monitor it, let's see what you need, and then we'll increase. Now, if you don't have that mechanism in place, it's going to be even more critical to look at your service providers and see what they can offer you. In the way of, I know this is not infrastructure in terms of bandwidth, but how we chose what to fund and what to do internally came down to staff. What do you have in place to support what you're about to have? Moodle is a great learning management system if you have the people in place. I mean, it's free, it's open source. If you have the people in place with the expertise to develop the shell and then also populate the curriculum content. We did not have that. As I said, it was superintendent, was former technology coordinator, and me. That was the extent of our technology staff. So we looked at, yes, this is the learning management system we chose was Angel. Now we are moved into Blackboard Learn space, and it's an expensive adventure, but it's still less than a comparable salary for a person to develop out Moodle. So it gets down to what do you have in your local resources, and what expertise do you have in your local human resource pool.
I think to add to that too, and one of the experiences I have in being kind of a third party, in some ways I act as a vendor for a private cloud, for a variety of different services. A challenge that I find really interesting is a lot of times school districts want to do it themselves, regardless of whether it costs more, or regardless if they have the staff and sometimes they limp along. It's disappointing when I go out to a school district and I see an Exchange server running on a desktop. It's not uncommon, and they call me and they say, it went down, can you send somebody out to fix it? Well, why don't you host it with me? Why don't you host it in Google Apps for Education? Well, we like to do it ourselves. I run a student information system for 60 districts. As the IT director may change in a district, they want to take it back and do it themselves, even in spite of the fact that I'm less expensive. It's just an odd phenomenon out there. So I really encourage school districts, again, working with vendors, working with intermediate agencies, whatever it may be, to look at the total cost of ownership of what they're trying to do as a solution. Everything together. I'm finding Google Apps for Education fantastic, for a number of our districts to outsource their email, to do, a collaboration and project-based instruction using the collaboration tools within Google. It's amazing. It's free. Why would you want to install Word on every desktop? And, Microsoft is now coming along with Office 365, which is really encouraging. So I really encourage districts to look at that as well. So it's really just kind of a mindset, a mind shift, looking at the total cost of ownership. We do have some of our, just speaking of infrastructure and wireless infrastructure, some of our counties in California doing it themselves because they can't get a provider to go out there. Verizon isn't going to go and serve in a very rural district a few thousand people. So one of the things that each county office has is something called the Education Broadband Service. It's frequency. We can actually set up our own network on that frequency. Now, I lease mine out. I actually make quite a bit of money leasing it out to Clearwire. But a lot of the counties actually implement their own network, like Kern County. I don't even know if Verizon's in Kern County. You probably wouldn't know. So they built their own network, and it's been very effective.
So, yeah,
They had to.
great answers. And we are very close to being out of time. I apologize. Please feel free to engage with each of us afterwards. I just want to close. I think what both of them said about that particular question, it has a lot to do with multi-purpose use and scaling. So if something is inherently multi-purpose, then chances are scale effects will lead you towards a buy decision versus a build decision, right? There's no reason for each individual, department in a school to have their own payroll system because it's inherently multi-purpose and you can scale. Likewise, each district wouldn't build their own payroll system because it's fairly uniform across districts. But there are points at which that breaks down. So, for us, you asked about the business aspect, and for us, we're in that same situation. So we are a national wireless carrier specifically serving kids in education. That's what we do. But we don't go out and build our own network because it wouldn't make sense for us to go build an entire network just for that one demographic. The network capabilities themselves are multi-purpose across many verticals. So we actually go and we buy wholesale from Sprint and we become a virtual network operator where they run the network. We do Sprint and Clearwire now, but they run the network, but we become a carrier who can then layer the differentiation on top of that common infrastructure to deliver specifically to kids in education. So it really, your build buy, I think, decision is based on scalability and where you need that differentiation to accomplish a purpose. So, and we are out of time. I know there's a networking break next, or what is the next thing on the agenda? Lunch. All right. Well, we wouldn't want to hold you up
We're
for
all
lunch.
like, lunch.
But please come engage with everybody, either here in the room or as we walk over to lunch. And we have topic tables at lunch as well. So, thank you.